I'd like to switch our focus to let's talk about really decoupling gender roles and our focus on inclusivity for the LGBTQIA plus community. Um, it's important work, and I'd like to talk to Lori about Wednesday Night Hop. Could you share some of the ways that you've really encouraged inclusion at your dances?
Yeah, and hi everyone, I'm Lori. I just really wanted to say thank you to all of our presenters in the previous section, because when we talk about inclusivity, when we talk about the things we are doing to make our scene better, all of this is connected. So when we're talking about anti-racism, when we're talking about, including LGBTQIA, when we're talking about communities that are underrepresented or feel like they're ignored or can't participate equally in this dance and music that we love, we're talking about the same things. We're identifying values that we think are important to pass on in this dance, in this community. And we are looking at ways to make that happen. So even though I'm going to use as an example what Wednesday Night Hop has done for degendering the dance roles, we're really still talking about the same thing, which I hope that everyone has a chance to do, which is you're taking some time to investigate what your values are in this dance, looking into the history and values of the dance and its scene, looking into how you can educate and pass that on. You know, that education is, it feels like a big overwhelming topic, but it is our responsibility as organizers to chip away at that. You're gonna mess up. If you thought that you weren't gonna mess up, this is just me, destroying that right now. I have messed up big time. Oh, you will mess up big time. Oh, start small so that those big time mess ups are small mess ups. That's like the best advice I could give you there. But for an example, one of the ways that I could see a seed become a movement, become a standard and progress is through our scene, where we started to integrate more Balboa specifically into the South Bay region of San Francisco Bay Area. We were blessed to have a couple of teachers, and I'm just going to drop their names as Randy Mastretti, and Kara Britt, and they were amazing teachers and Balboa dancers that had started living near us, very local, and started taking up little Balboa lessons in a dancer's home. And through over the years that they were running these little intimate classes, they had moved their education format into everybody leads, everybody follows. And this may be something that you've heard of before, but the idea that you teach a class in which you're following and then you switch roles and then you're leading and you're kind of going over the same concept, but from two different perspectives. And it was amazing. And for me, first coming into Balboa with that expectation, I felt like it gave me personally a whole view of the dance in the way that only learning one role at a time would not have given me right off the bat. So like that was the seed. They made this choice based on their values of how they saw the dance danced and how they wanted people to experience more of the dance in their lessons. And then those of us who were in that, Balboa club grew up, started taking positions of authority in organizations, as teachers, even just as dancers on the floor that other people are looking at and going, oh, good, look at them. Like, what are they doing? Right. And so when we transmitted that information, our knowledge of that Balboa to others, we set it up specifically in ways that aligned with those values that we cherished. For instance, when we started Balboa classes at Wednesday Night Hop, we opened them as everybody leads, everybody follows right off the bat. And we didn't have a lot of classes to start. We had maybe, 1 month here, 1 month there, like a little elective. People were interested in Balboa. Oh, good. I'm glad you're interested in Balboa. Well, let's have another Balboa class. It's also going to be everybody leads, everybody follows. What about another one? And before you knew it, and I'm really truncating here what really is like a decade of time, right? Before you knew it, in a decade, we then have Balboa classes available every month. They are all everybody leads, everybody follows at every level of expertise and experience. And that has had a big impact on how our dancers see, feel, learn about the dance, how they conceive of their own dancing. And this is not to say that anyone can just choose a role that they like and do it, right? We don't take that option away, but now there's more opportunity for them to sort of see things. And personally, as a person who is now grown up and now sort of supports this educational format, I remember going to California Balboa Classic when I could go to CalBal and taking a class. And I was a leader in this class and, stuck with that role for the entire weekend. But they were introducing this rather complex movement. And I noticed in myself as they were teaching this move, this set of moves, really, I realized that I was able to understand it quicker than a lot of people in the class because I knew what I wanted to feel as a follow. So it's that whole picture of the dance, which I was like, oh, if I were following this, I would want to know like this direction and this timing and this thing. And so as a lead, I was able to use my skills as a leader to instigate that, to give my follows something that I knew would communicate clearly to them. So that's just my personal experience, being a leader and a follower and seeing what changes in our curriculum can do for pushing our scene forward. Now, this is just like one example of something that we did. Are we going to solve degendering, gender assumptions in dance? No, you're not going to be able to do that. But we are working towards something that we believe in. And so we have the unique experience of being proud of what we tried, being proud of something we're building, watching that, growing it, feeling like nurturing towards it, and then being excited for how that might change in the future, right? So it's going to continue to develop. And it's sort of being happy for that opportunity to try something new that makes the scene better, instead of letting ourselves be bogged down with, but am I really changing the world? You've got a small sphere of influence here. So if there's one thing I could do, it is I would like to encourage you, whoever you are watching this stream, that you have spent some time thinking about your values. Be brave in that. I'm here to personally encourage you to try something new in your scene as we reopen. Now's a great time. Choose something and do that. I also want to drop a couple more names, which once again, I am not a genius. I just know a lot of really good thinkers. And the more people you know, the better this progress will be. So Anais Sekine and Sylvia with a Y, with a W, sorry, Bailu from Cat's Corner in Montreal came and did a little teacher's workshop for us in the San Francisco Bay Area. And one of the concepts they introduced was the idea that one person alone cannot make substantive, lasting change. In order to have substantive, lasting change, you need incremental progress by lots of people that are encouraging each other towards common values and goals. And we named this idea Swarm. So in where we are in the San Francisco Bay Area, we are extremely privileged to have lots of different scenes run by individuals and tiny groups. And we try to encourage each other to be the best that we can be. And this does not mean we encourage them to be just like us. Wednesday Night Hop has an everybody leads, everybody follows Balboa curriculum. We do not expect the other scenes to also do that. We can be proud of our achievements without pushing them to be exactly like us, because they are excelling in ways they're also pushing towards these values, but maybe they just don't have the time to be working on that one. In this age of the internet and the global Lindy Hop community, I hope that we can help encourage and support our fellow scenes to be the best they can be, considering the locality they're in, the people that they're trying to communicate this dance and that energy and enthusiasm for the dance to. I hope we can encourage them and not shut them down, because with different ideas, different approaches, we will all better understand what everyone needs to make these journey. I'm extremely grateful to the dancers before me who have come and talked to us, who I have listened to, who I could take classes from, who opened the door for me to become better at this. And my job now as a person in authority is to keep that door open for other people to come through and surpass me.
So let's go, Lori. Yeah! Come on.
Yeah. So we were talking in the lead up about forming your swarm. May I encourage you to form your swarm, if not in your local space, at least on the internet. And like, you know, there are these wonderful organizations where you can find like-minded people, like Collective Voices for Change and the Black Lindy Hoppers Fund and all these organizers. But, you know, I would say maybe start taking like 1 or 2, 3 friends that you like what they're thinking, you like what they're doing, just having like conversations with them, telling them, oh, I'm thinking about doing this. And they might be like, oh, that's a great idea. Or in my case, I have friends who are like, so that's problematic. let me tell you why. And then it changes into something better. I promise you, it does become better if you open yourself up to that collaboration.
Lori, I love Form Your Swarm. That just like, I feel like that just rocks. You rock.
Can I drop one more name? I just want to shout out to Amira.
Shout it out, Lori. Shout it out.
Amira Selim. Amira has been heading our local swarm group. We call it Swarm, where we just get together monthly and talk about anti-racism issues. This is something that we have self-selected that we're interested in. And we talk about like, well, okay, this idea, how do we implement that? What are you guys thinking? And it's just a free form exchange of ideas. Maybe some of this will pan out. Maybe some of it won't. Maybe some of it will be completely different 7 months from now. But the idea is that we're here for each other. And you know, as problem solvers, I'd say that partner dancing, we're not super interested in doing it by ourselves. You know, we already like to collaborate. Let's lean into that strength. Let's find our partners.
That's excellent. And I love, I mean, that really is also decolonizing the dance in that we're finding our, community and resisting the urge to take on everything by ourselves. So I love, I mean, the encouragement, and obviously Lori she's a connector, an excellent resource for anyone who is looking to kind of get started in their process. So shout out to you. I do, speaking of degendering classes, I mean, Lori talked about starting from degendering roles and everybody leads, everybody follows. I know Vicky, with your beginning classes, that you've had some success in your beginner classes. So I would love to hear how you've taken that on.
So for us at Lindy Groove, so everybody has been saying that representation and visibility is very important. So we start with our instructors. So if you have instructors that's different from the norm, that's teaching, and everybody will be like, oh, hey, I should try the other role too. So frequently we have the 2 female gender instructors teaching together as lead and follow, or we had 2 male gender instructors teaching together as lead or follow. With those classes, we have a lot of success of people trying or just starting as the other roles. And I want to piggyback off of Lori what she mentioned about the Balboa method. So when we come back, we want to try that also. Thank you for the idea in our Lindy classes. So thank you for that brilliant idea. And I think with our conversation with Rory, they also mentioned trying something like this too. And thank you for the idea, Rory. So yes, we are very excited to try all these ideas that everybody's been sharing.
And Rory, I'm sorry, Rory, you had some great suggestions that you shared with us in the language that can be used to be more inclusive. Could you share some of that with us?
Yeah, I think a lot of times um, when people think about how they're going to be teaching a class or interacting in a social dance, there's this idea, okay, I'm not going to say like man or woman or male or female. And that's a great place to start, but I would encourage people to move past that, right? And kind of the idea that I want to promote is just rethinking your assumptions. We make a lot of assumptions. That's how we survive throughout the world. If we had to worry about every little detail every day, we would just collapse. So we do make a lot of these assumptions, but I do want to say, like, when you're approaching someone new, not making that assumption about what their gender might be or how to address them. And if it's someone you've never met before, maybe try starting with something more neutral, like addressing them as they or them. But once you learn what their pronouns are, to use the ones that they have said that they use. So like, it's the same, you're still misgendering someone if they say their pronouns are she and you're calling them them, right? That's still misgendering because that she has specifically asked you to call her she. And so that's something that I want you to keep in mind. And there's, little words here and there that instructors use, like ladies and gentlemen, sir and ma'am. There are a lot of different words that we can use. Welcome everyone, folks, friends and family, esteemed guests. There are all sorts of ways that we can be inclusive and not alienate people who are already like, maybe they're not out because they don't have that feeling of being accepted, right? If I go to this big event and everyone's saying, ladies and gentlemen, I'm like, oh, okay, I don't exist anymore. As a non-binary person, I'm just like, all right, everyone got a welcome except for me. Like, I know that's not the intention, but that's how it feels. And then like it starts to add up over and over and over again. And people start calling you by a name or a pronoun that you don't like, or assuming your role. And it builds up these little microaggressions. And so it's not just like, oh, someone called me a woman once, right? It's not a one-time thing. It's built up over and over and over. And like, that's what makes people, queer people, especially, not want to stay. And that's something that I know Marie had mentioned about these toxic environments, and that like you get people to join and they're not going to want to stay if they're constantly feeling erased or invisible.
Thank you for sharing your personal stories with us.
Yeah.
I'm gonna.
Well, I just want to add real quick, Shahid, that as Rory is talking about, wanting to stay, and thank you so much for giving examples of better language for people to use. As we know, more and more young people are identifying outside of binary gender roles, outside of what was considered a traditional definition of sexuality. And so there is also a demographic shift in that perspective. So as Nico was talking earlier, we're looking at our entire world changing, especially in the United States. I know we have viewers from outside of the US, but issues of race, issues of gender and sexuality, these are things that are global. And we want to bear in mind that these are people who we want in our communities you know, we want to have exchange and interaction, and and so it is so important for us as team leaders and organizers to be bold and make those, even if they're just small steps, like saying leads and follows, or providing um, name tags and asking people to write pronouns and or dance roles. Uh, I know that I've seen some places where they have pins, and it's, you know, lead, follow, or both, or you can add your pronouns. And so there are so many ways to start small with changing how the people who are coming into your community are addressing each other, and therefore increasing the likelihood that people uh, who don't identify as, you know, what is considered traditional, which is, you know, Eurocentric and white supremacist anyway, then we're going to, you know, we're just going to have a much richer and fuller community as a result. So that's that's my word.
Those some beautiful words, Laurel. I want to get Michael and Tina in here, but Rory, I know you had a few. I know there were some shout outs to be had.
Yeah, I did want to point out that there are some queer groups that you can get involved with. So there's a Facebook group that is for LGBTQIA plus self-identified people and allies. So if you want a space to learn as an ally, that's a great resource. There's also a group that mirrors that, but is specifically only for queer and LGBTQIA plus self-identified people. And this includes dancers, musicians, organizers, anybody who's in the scene, right? It doesn't just have to be dancers. And about a year ago, we started a group of queer dancers noticed that we didn't really have a very strong sense of community or who the other dancers were. You know, we couldn't necessarily look in a crowd and say, okay, yes, that person is a part of my community. And so what we've done is we started the Queer Plus Swing Collective, and we are an international organization, and we're working to amplify and nurture queer voices in the Lindy Hop community. And we meet somewhat irregularly, but we're trying to, you know, we're still a new organization, but we meet on occasional Saturdays. We have an upcoming event on July 10th at 10 a.m. Pacific time. This is only for self-identified LGBTQIA plus individuals. So it's a safe place. You do not have to be out to join. You will not be outed if you join. The only way to get that information is through the Queer Only Facebook page. So it's not posted in the allies group, and no one else has access to this information. Although if you need help finding that information, if you don't have a Facebook, please, you know, reach out to one of us. But we're really trying to build community and build those relationships so that we can have a stronger message going forward, so that in the future, you know, if we have more of these conversations, it's not just going to be me or Adam up here saying, okay, here's what we need. It's going to be all of our voices, because, you know, I can only talk about my personal experiences as a queer person. I can't speak to anyone else. And the community is so, so broad and diverse, with just like, you know, each letter is something totally different. And so it's really important that we get all of those voices, and particularly at the intersections of identities. So we encourage people of color, people with disabilities. If you're interested in leadership, we're totally just open. We want to hear, we want to know, we want to just expand and provide a platform for people to really feel like their voices are getting heard as queer people in the Lindy Hop community.
And if you want to find out more about the Queer Plus Swing Collective, there is a link in the chat. one of the things that was really important for the Move Together team for this particular panel was to have event organizers on here. So it's great to hear folks talk from an organizational standpoint, because you all are the ones that are in charge of the way the resources, primarily in charge of the way the resources get distributed in this community. So I want to, but we do have a couple organizers, that operate on the national scene that have been doing positive change in this community for many years. And I want to take some time and honor them, because what we're talking about right now is values. And if this is part of your value system as an organizer, then you take the steps and the efforts that you can for your event to honor your own specific values. So Michael, I'm going to put you on the spot, my bra, and could you, we kind of talk about incremental change when we talk to organizations, because you can't really attack every single issue all at once, so you actually have to have targeted measures, and you have to be kind of specific, which is, I'm going after outreach, I'm going after hiring practices, and then maybe you continue to stack the blocks. So can you share with us your approach with the events that you've run?
Great. Thank you so much for teeing it up so well. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but I'm super honored to be here among all y'all. And I'm very inspired to hear you all talk and to share your vision and leadership. And I think when it comes to the values themselves, I hope everyone was taking notes for that first hour, because I know I learned a lot. But I guess what I've been asked to sort of talk about is specific policy stuff. So for me, I think everyone here that was representing sort of a different interest spoke to that interest really well. And as as a straight white male in a position of power, I feel like my role should mostly be to just try and make that stuff happen, like turn those values into policy, so that our scene can actually change. So here's just some things that I've done with my event, and feel free to jump in if it's time to move on, or if anyone wants to ask any follow-ups, because these are kind of like little stuff. So let's see. I'll start with Lenny Focus. One of the things we got rid of a couple years ago was any sort of deal where during early registration you have to show up at a very specific time in order to get the best financial deal on registering for the event. And you had people sort of setting their timers and trying to get like the first 30 super cheap slots, and then the next 50 slightly more expensive slots. And there was sort of a flash sale concept. And a lot of the feedback that we got, which I think was very valid, was that really caters to people sort of at a certain level of like job stability and flexibility in their life to bend their schedule to the event, and et cetera. And it was just really frustrating for people. And it was a barrier to entry also financially if you couldn't get some of those best slots. So we got rid of that. And now our registration is much more sort of open pricing over the long term. Let's see. I'm going to jump around a little bit, but some of the stuff that Rory was talking about and that Lori talked about also, about the gender inclusive language, the way we talk about everything. So one of the things that we implemented a couple of years ago is to have a language and values document that as an event we create, and we ask all of our instructors and staff to not only read but sign on to. I won't go into every detail, but it goes as far as to say suggestions for how to talk in front of class and how to avoid speaking habits that are alienating to certain groups of people or are problematic in other ways. So we've got that document that hopefully has some teeth to it. And on top of that, every year, that all gets sent way in advance. That's part of the hiring process. But once the event actually happens, there's a human person-to-person component to it also, where, and this is like the scariest, 20 minutes of my year, but I go to a staff meeting with everybody and I walk through that document sort of item by item and talk about why each thing is important, why it's important to the event, and why I hope they take it seriously. And I let myself receive questions and pushback about any of that stuff, so that it really becomes like, this isn't just words on a page. We really want to create a space for some cultural change here. So I think that with any policy, there has to be that component of like putting yourself on the line and actually having person-to-person interactions involving it. Some other stuff. This one's it's a little less of like a bullet point policy, but I do think it's important. We've really tried to de-emphasize levels as a concept in sorting dancers. There are definitely a time and place for words like beginner, intermediate, and advanced, but we don't want that to continue to be the default in the same way, especially at a larger event where there's this tendency to be like, and we did this, so like we were very guilty of perpetuating it up to a point, but where we have like level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and it's just this very false hierarchy that gives people the idea that their dancing can be scored in a single number, but also that like there's this progression that like if you were level 6 last year, then you better be level 7 next year. And also a presumption that I encountered a lot, which is, well, I was in level 8 last year, shouldn't I be teaching now? And like that kind of, those systems, like, I don't know, maybe I've just been in it too long, but I was super done with that energy. And I also think that the basic concept of levels is really, it's really exclusionary. And it keeps people that you've rated differently from interacting, from having a social relationship too during camp. If the 8s don't meet the 4s or whatever. So I mean, there's essentially just a ton of problems with it. Chisoma earlier was talking about the concept of coloniality, and I can't help but feel like it's all woven in there. It's this system of sorting which we've created, which really just does more harm than good. We do now have a system. If an instructor wants to have a class, and granted, this is easier because our classes are 2 to 4 hours long, they're longer. But if there's really a skill component that's required, like if you have to be able to swing out at 230 beats per minute for 5 minutes straight without stopping, like, okay, you can have that class. We're going to give you a 10, 15-minute slot to skill test that particular thing and weed out anyone who can't do that thing. But it's like very narrow, and it's asking the instructors to like really focus on what's strictly needed rather than just sort of the slightly lazier, oh, I want the event to just give me the best people kind of concept. We want to get away from that. Let's see. Another sort of language thing, and this is a little less of a policy and more of a pet peeve, but it comes into play with like hiring and with which kind of people I bring onto the team. There's definitely been like, there's been so much catering, in my opinion, to like a very specific category of like white college attending males, especially like people in STEM fields, where like I've witnessed the entire language of the dance shift towards like phrases like linear and rotational momentum and compression versus leverage and stuff. And like, this is not to say like we don't welcome and love the geeks, like we absolutely do. And there's like, I get the fun of it, I really do. But like, again, I've witnessed that become the default language. And I just think we should acknowledge that that is a cultural change. That is taking an art form that had a particular flavor and really, really changing it quite a bit. So I just think, especially as a white person, you should tread lightly in this area. You should treat yourself as a guest in this art form and not be like, I'm going to make all the jokes about it in, my language. So again, like that's not a policy exactly, but it is like, I think about that when I'm having conversations with people and listening to them talk about whether they would be a good fit for the kind of feeling I want to have at Lenny Focus. I have a whole section here about like hiring. in more detail, but maybe that's a good moment to sort of pause.
Well, I mean, fantastic stuff, first and foremost. But I know with Michael, you and Tina, you've also been re-examining your hiring practices. And so I know, Tina, not only have we talked about kind of deconstructing that hierarchical method of hiring practices, the I went in level 8, now I teach right concept. If you could just share a little bit about the way that you've been approaching your hiring practices, would be quite interested.
Okay,
Sure.
sure. Yeah, Tina, go on.
I think from the beginning, maybe because, as a Black woman, I'm coming from a different perspective. I never learned how to dance, counting or anything like that. So when I'm looking for instructors, I'm not necessarily looking for them to teach in a specific sort of way. I've always, since the beginning in 1998 with Lindy Fest, and since then, looked in hiring people that I considered to have a certain level of excellence. So I don't necessarily ascribe to this sort of celebrity culture that people think that, that's out there. And I guess it is out there. I don't see things that way. I see things more as I'm looking for excellence. So in my hiring practices, I've always gone sort of outside the box and hired who I thought could showcase their talent in some sort of way. And so even in the class, whether they had a certain level of or a certain style of teaching that's not necessarily what people are expecting, that's what I've always done. So and I've always gone out and looked for dancers, and I still do that now, so I try not to make sure that I'm not stale. So I'm going out and I'm always looking and searching for people. I went to Nevermore, and I was telling you guys about this before. This was, I guess, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And I saw this young man dancing, young Black dancer. And I went over and I introduced myself, and he said his name was Tydrick. I had never seen him before. He started sharing with me some of the later on, after we had talked that time and then time later during the weekend, he started sharing me some details about how people were saying things to him about his dancing, and sort of in a negative way. And I said, well, first of all, you dance, that person that told you that, you dance way better than they could ever hope to. Don't listen to them. And I know I just met you, but here's what I'm going to do. You're going to come to Lindy Fest. And I guarantee you within the next year or two, you're going to be teaching at Lindy Fest. And even though the pandemic happened and that didn't necessarily pan out, he has come. We see him, we see Tydrick exploding, and I think that's a good thing. And I think as a event organizer, you should always be looking out for those type of things. I've always created opportunities for instructors and for people that you've never heard of. I think they think like, okay, well, there's just this level. As an organizer, you've got to be searching out for that new spark. And if you've got a good eye, you can catch that in people. And it's not so important that they know how to count in a certain way. Sometimes it's about how we learn, especially how I learned culturally as a dancer early on, was by sight or by scatting or whatever there is, So I think that's sort of important. We've created opportunities for bands. I know here in Houston, like we brought in people like Kermit Ruffins and from New Orleans, and band leaders that you probably wouldn't think of. That's not just a certain level of the just the bands that are out there. So I'm open to that. I'm open to finding new bands. I had to go all the way to Paris to see Charles Turner. And I mean, I guess I could have went to New York, but he was playing there. But I was also there to see other dancers because I wanted to see dancers outside of the US and maybe some dancers that hadn't been on the scene. I did see some people, it was the first time I saw Helena. I saw some other people that I got in the pocket to kind of invite, the pandemic habit, so that's not, necessarily worked out yet. But we've hired Charles Turner for ILHC, and I think that you just have to be open to keep going out there and broaden your hiring practices.
And Tina, and let's just take a quick moment to talk about the bands, because I know that there's like a gap. Like I know we've identified the concern, which is we are looking for more representation as it relates to
Yeah.
bands and the music, but many organizers have said to us that there's challenges in doing that. So there
Yeah.
is a bit of a gap, and
There is.
I know we're all kind of talking about how to bridge that gap.
Yeah.
You, Michael, you want to share some of your feelings on that?
Sure. I'll jump in, and I'm sure Tina has a lot to say about it as well. I think my starting point for that conversation is I just speaking as a musician, I really want to I want to make sure I'm always underlying the cultural importance of those historical Black swing artists and their craft and like the specifics of what they did. To me, like, we study Whitey's Lindy Hoppers and we study Harvest Moonball footage, and we watch Spirit Moves, and we care about that stuff. We care about how they danced. We care about who they were. Like that's not something we're looking to stick in a museum and let sit there. Like we dig that. That's why we're here. And to me, the musical side of that is just as important. So like arrangers like Fletcher Henderson and Edgar Sampson, who arranged for Chick Webb, pianists like Count Basie and Duke Ellington, too many horn players to list, Lester Young, Ben Webster, Sweets Edison. They're all as important as Whitey's Lindy Hoppers. So for me, like the mission is always like yes, people doing the thing now are like, that's what we make the event out of. But I always am going to be pointed back towards those artists, because again, like it all started with the music. Those were the people that got Lindy Hop to exist. They inspired it into existence. So I'm always going to be pointed back there. Now, when it comes to like the institutional challenges of like, finding more Black musicians, there's gosh, we could do 3 hours on that, and we still wouldn't scratch the surface on the importance of it. But Tina, we were talking in a recent conversation, and a lot of the people here on the panel were present for that, about it's just like Tina was saying about going out and meeting people and forming those relationships. You can't just do a Google search, and you can't just rely on what everybody else is doing. You have to meet people. You have to go to their shows. And, if you like a musician, if you find a Black musician that's speaking to you and doing something that you love, like go to their show, buy their records, figure out who are the people that they're hiring in their band, and do you also like them. Like these networks actually already exist, but like there's just very overlap with the white swing community. So there is just an enormous backlog in that process of us going to them and making those connections and relationships.
I know you've got many thoughts on this one.
Yeah, and it's just like, how we have to have representation with the instructors, we have to have representation with the bands as well. And it is just like Michael's saying, we've got to start reaching out. I have to take it personally and do that myself as an organizer, and not just as a Black person, but as an organizer, period. If we're saying that the music comes first, and then that representation should be there as well. There are some challenges to that. Culture, and I'm just going to throw out a couple of things that I've experienced. Like they're probably, if they're really good musicians, they're probably going to be pretty expensive. We tried to do that for Norma 100, where we tried to hire the Count Basie band, and it was $25,000, and there's just no way we could do that, but we had to do what we could to, you know, honor Norma in the way that we could, and whether that was with singers or things like that. There's also going to be a difference there. There are cultural differences that they may not even tell you. Like, I can say, you know, so we have this as an organizer, you have this thing where, you know, you put two people in a room. I can tell you right now, for a Black man of a certain age, that is not going to happen. So your costs may increase when you're talking about hotel expenses. So you have to look at these things and adjust your budgets and think of things that culturally, well, okay, well, you can't just say, well, okay, that person's way too expensive. And, you know, you try and do what you can, even if it's a small thing, you know, but representation does definitely matter.
I appreciate you saying that, Tina, and I know you've shared with us your challenges as an organizer, but then also with all the other hats that you have, and that elders have come to you and have had very specific
Yes.
personal requests for you that you have had to honor, and I know finding Black band members is challenging and difficult for just the first reason you said, just financially. So I want to push this out to the community, that if there's anyone out there listening to this and you have resources for Black musicians, you know, maybe we got to pay a little bit more money right now, but that will start to level out. Sometimes you have to take an extra effort until things start balancing. So anyone who has any resources of Black musicians out there, up and coming, good, great, you know, please share that. Email the Black Lindy Hoppers Fund. It's one of the reasons why we're asking for support. We're asking for resources. We're asking for dollars, volunteering, because now we have an organization and that we can really start creating positive change in this scene. And I just wanted to take one more moment to honor both of you, because I know you've been in this scene a long time, creating positive change. And unfortunately, the ones that are doing the positive change tend to get the highest level of criticism. I don't know what it is, but the ones that are doing the work always get the biggest hits, you know, and you know, and they're working for the cause. So I want to thank you both for being on here, and I'm going to transition to another video. It's Dion and Judith. This is an organization called Swing Diversity. They're actually working in the West Coast swing community, but they're doing some really exciting and special things, and I think it's important for all of us to hear what they're doing. And I'm not going to say any more. I'm just going to let them speak for themselves. B, cue the video for us.